Welcome back to Yoshi Entertainment, everybody. So, there have been a lot of updates issued, if you will, through the media and the news about the situation concerning Gene Hackman, his wife, his children, and this fortune that he has. It's been a big mess that has come out of a lot of this. Now, allegedly, there have been some updates. Like I've said before in the past, I try to wait until a lot of information comes out before I just start making videos. Now, there are people, certain YouTubers, who make multiple videos, give multiple updates throughout the day, throughout the week on certain subjects. I have nothing against that. I'm just the type of person that likes to have more information all gathered together before I put out a video or another video concerning said situation. Now, allegedly, they are releasing information saying that they are believing that Gene Hackman may have passed away due to heart issues, heart disease, and a really far progressed, if you will, Alzheimer's disease. And I quote, as a contributing factor, end quote. So allegedly they're saying that he was already dealing with these issues, and it makes everybody scratch their head. I'm gonna be real honest with y'all, considering the fact that his daughter, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, basically told everybody that he was in perfect health for a 95-year-old. Remember, that was one of the things she said. Oh, even though he was up in the age, he was in very good health. He was fine. Nothing was wrong with him. Now we're finding out allegedly he had two health issues, very serious health issues that may have led to his passing. Now, they're alleging that he may have passed away on the 18th of last month. They're also alleging, according to the autopsy, that once again it was heart disease that may have taken him out of here, so to speak. And I quote, he was in a very poor state of health. He had significant heart disease, and I think ultimately that this is what resulted in his deceasement, end quote. And that is what the chief medical investigator, Dr. Heather Jarrell, said after taking a look at all of this. Now, as for his wife, they believe that she may have allegedly passed away from hantavirus, from a hantavirus infection. That same doctor said, and I quote, people with hantavirus infections can initially feel flu-like symptoms for roughly 3 to 6 days and then start to have fluid in and around their lungs. At that point, a person can perish very quickly within 24 to 48 hours, roughly speaking, without medical treatment. Jarrell said it's not uncommon to find someone down on the floor as a part of a terminal collapse, so to speak, and that may very well have been what happened, end quote. It was also stated by Dr. Jarrell that he may not have even realized or was aware of the fact that his wife had passed when she did, because he was so far progressed into Alzheimer's, allegedly, that also allegedly his stomach was empty, indicating that he hadn't eaten for a while before he himself passed, allegedly, and also that might have been why, because once she passed away, he no longer had someone to look after him, and he could not look after himself. Now, some people didn't know what hantavirus was before this situation, so the one silver lining that I feel like is coming out of this, I'm trying to see some kind of a positive, is that it's spreading information that people may need to know for the future. Now, it is said to primarily have been found in deer mice, but apparently, allegedly, it can be also found in other rodents. And I quote, hantavirus can be contracted from exposure to excrement from a mouse species that carries the virus. Avoiding contact with or breathing in aerosolized rodent urine or feces, especially in a poorly ventilated area, is key, end quote. Now, just because some of them, it said some species, may carry the virus, does not mean you should not exercise caution, point blank period, when it comes to these animals, to rodents in your vicinity. And once again, I said this might help somebody in the future, because you never know who might be living in what kind of condition, who didn't know this information, who needs to know this information. Like I said before, there could be somebody who has a grandparent or a parent living in a facility, in a retirement home, who might have found out that there are rodents running amok in said facility, and now they understand how dangerous, or how much more dangerous, that situation is now. Now, they did say that the hantavirus, which they also call hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, is supposedly a rare disease to catch, that is also not transmittable from human to human, and they only said that about the strains in the US. But once again, that is not an excuse to not exercise caution. Once again, they listed the different flu-like symptoms that this can be characterized by, or that it shows up as, so to speak. Now, there were people alleging that they actually saw Betsy going around shopping, doing her normal routine a day allegedly before her alleged day that this all happened and that she passed. Once again, as it said before, this stuff can show up very quickly and then progress very quickly. Remember, it said 24 to 48 hours, and then people were gone maximum with that kind of stuff. So it could have very well have been she was fine or feeling fine or didn't feel any different that one day, and then literally 24 hours later, all of a sudden, she's feeling all of these symptoms. She doesn't know what's going on. And I quote, state health investigators conducted a risk assessment of the couple's property Wednesday, while the main residence itself was deemed a low risk for hantavirus exposure. Signs of rodent entry were found on other structures on the property, end quote. So allegedly, they had people to conduct an investigation, as it says here, as I just read, to basically piece together to be sure that it was hantavirus. The only way they can figure that out is if there was some kind of entryway that the rodents made into the home. This is allegedly after they also tested Betsy for hantavirus. Also, they tested Jean for hantavirus. The only person who came back positive for the virus allegedly was Betsy, which is how they came to this last conclusion concerning what happened to them. So to piece it all together, what they're believing is that unfortunately somehow Betsy came in contact with rodent droppings, etc. It may have been due to the fact that they were both a bit up in the age. I know 65 is not that old. You know, some people don't consider 65 that old. There are plenty of very active 65-year-olds. I don't know how well they were keeping up the house. I don't know if they had a housekeeper. I don't know if the house was in proper conditions to be conducive of good health, so to speak. There were some people trying to allege that they were not keeping the house proper, so to speak. Now, I'm not going to put that on those people because I don't know that. That's just what some people were trying to allege. We don't know for sure unless the news network comes out and says the house was a mess, etc. So they're piecing together, like I said, that she may have come across rodent excrement. Maybe she was trying to clean it. Maybe somehow a rodent got into the house. We don't know. Maybe she was trying to clean up whatever the mess was left behind. Maybe she came in contact with it and didn't realize that she did. And then she contracted the virus, not knowing that she did. Went out going about her usual day up until she got back home. And then the virus progressed and she didn't know what was going on. Perhaps the medication she was going for was for her. They alleged that it might have been for Gene Hackman. We don't know yet because those medical records have not been released. They're private and they should stay private. They still don't know who the medicine was for. They're alleging that it could have possibly been to help her once she started to feel those symptoms. Once again, we don't know for sure. Her collapsing may have been due to, we thought before, we pieced together before, maybe she tripped and fell. It could have been due to her medical emergency. If it's true that she was suffering from that ailment, it could have progressed, like I said, very quickly. As the doctor said before, it's not uncommon for people to collapse in these moments. And unfortunately, because Gene Hackman allegedly was so far progressed, once again, in the issue that he was having, the alleged Alzheimer's, he probably didn't know what was going on. He probably was not aware. And unfortunately, she may have perished due to what happened to her. And then because she could not take care of him, he ended up perishing a week later. Same thing with the dog that was unfortunately left in the cage. May have unfortunately starved to death because he was not in the right frame of mind to take care of anything, let alone himself. Now, unfortunately, the problems do not stop there. So allegedly, apparently, Gene Hackman left quite literally everything to his wife, Betsy. Now, some people had some issues with that because they were saying, now, Gene Hackman, why didn't you leave your children, your 3 children, anything? What is wrong with you? As a result, it did somewhat spark an argument, if you will, amongst people. Now, there were some people, I will never understand this mindset, I'm going to be real honest with y'all, who had this, oh, well, if he wanted to spend all his money on himself, he had the right to. He doesn't have to do anything for his adult children. I don't understand this mentality in our society where people think it's very acceptable to not leave your children an inheritance, your grandchildren an inheritance. If you have millions of dollars to your name, why wouldn't you want to help your children and your grandchildren? I don't think people really realize how awful and ungodly that really is to do. And once again, with all the other things that I talk about, people doing stuff to their children, they're going to have to give an account for, despite how much society made it seem like it was okay or justified it. You will have to to answer to God for why you didn't leave your children a dime when you had more than enough money. People are really talking about, oh no, he should have spent all his money on him in his old age. How much money do you really think the man would have been able to spend on himself at 95? Can we be realistic, please? With all due respect. Now, I could understand if his kids, treated him horribly, especially in their adult lives. And as a result, he said, because they're abusive to me, they don't care about me, and they only want my money, I'm giving it to my wife or to charity because y'all not about to get a dime from me if y'all are going to treat me horribly. I can understand that. Although a lot of people have been saying and bringing to light lately, some stuff that I didn't know before I started talking about this subject, is apparently he was not a very present father in the lives of his children. That allegedly he even admitted himself that he was not there for them the way he should have been, that he put them on the back burner for his career. Before anybody tries to say, oh, well, he had bills to pay, that man could have spent time with his kids. It disgusts me and disturbs me how quickly people will make excuses for parental absenteeism, so to speak. The fact that our communities and that our society will make it okay to throw your children once again on the back burner because of a job. There are people who work from sunup to sundown, and they refuse to allow that to stop them from being a present father, mother, guardian in the lives of their children. It's possible you can do it, but a lot of parents are very mediocre in that aspect. Let's just be blatantly honest. But anyways, he made Betsy his sole beneficiary. Now, here's the crazy part, that a lot of people have been looking at this situation in a somewhat suspicious way because the things kind of just lined up a little bit too conveniently, if you will, too coincidentally, if you will. And y'all know I really don't believe in coincidences like that. So apparently, allegedly, he had it put in his will that all of his stuff would go to Betsy. And then that there was a specific time frame, as according to her will, allegedly, if I've gotten this all correct, that if something happened to her before him within a certain time frame, then all of that money would go to a trust, if I'm not mistaken, and that there would be somebody over that who would dispense it, if you will, to charity. And I quote, her will, signed the same day as Hackman's, directs her estate to the Gene Hackman Living Trust in the event of her demise. Should Hackman not survive her by 90 days, the estate is to be administered to a charitable trust to fulfill purposes beneficial to the community consistent with the charitable preferences and interests expressed or indicated by my spouse and me during our lifetimes, end quote. So like I said before, if I'm not mistaken, there was a certain time frame where if she met her untimely demise before he did within that time frame, then allegedly it was supposed to go to a charity of his or her choosing. Like I said, if I have it all correctly, if I'm not mistaken. Now, remember earlier in the video, we talked about how she passed away allegedly, according to the people who investigated this, 7 days before he did, which doesn't fall within that 90-day period, allegedly. Once again, if I have it all correctly and if I'm understanding it properly. Apparently, allegedly, due to recent court filings, all three of Gene Hackman's children have now been named heirs, and I quote, with Gene Hackman's wife's passing, the children may now seek to claim the estate as his closest living relatives, end quote. This is what I'm talking about whenever I say that things are lining up very coincidentally, if you will, very uncannily so, because not only did she pass away before him, which made it hard for him to be able to survive on his own. Remember, they allegedly had not had any contact with anybody. The investigators were trying to claim they were trying to live a private life. I've said this before. You don't have the luxury of a private life in that position. They should have buried the hatchet, whatever was going on with the children. Somebody should have remained in contact with him so that once again, the moment somebody didn't start answering the phone, they could know something was going on, or that something was very morbidly wrong. But like I said, not only did she pass allegedly before him, making it impossible for him to take care of himself, especially with the lack of contact with his only living relatives, including his children, but also she passed away less than 90 days before him. And also from a virus that was very rare, apparently, allegedly, to even get to begin with. Like I said, the way these things lined up was a bit uncanny to me, but whatever, I guess. Now, there were some people on social media who had some things to say. One person on YouTube said, and I quote, "In Germany, there is a law which entitles the children to an immediate 50% of the inheritance. This law was made to protect the closest relatives from the impulsiveness of the testator. Serious abuse and attempted deletion are examples of disinheritance. In my opinion, this law also prevents parents from using inheritance to manipulate or threaten their children," end quote. Like I said before, nobody is saying that there haven't been any instances, any situations where children haven't been absolutely awful to their parents, despite how good their parents took care of them, how good they looked out for them, and don't deserve any money at all because they were just awful and they only wanted the money. They really wanted to just get their parents out of the way or just let them sit in whatever situations, just be in like a nursing home or whatever, or they don't take care of them, they don't bathe them because they're just waiting for them to perish to get the money. We are saying it didn't seem that way with this situation. Once again, I've come across people while doing some more digging and research who said that Gene Hackman was not the best father, that he even admitted he did not do right always by his children, that he even allegedly tried to apologize to them for all of the time that he was not there for them, for not being a really present father. And this is another thing that people were talking about, that conversation, bringing up that all that money does not matter to those children. They would rather you be there than have another shoe or another this or another nice house or another car or another purse or whatever you think you can spend your money on to replace you being there as a parent. Once again, I don't know the relationship that him and his kids had while he was living. Anything could have happened between the two of them. Although, like I said before, if it's true that he didn't do right by them, cutting them out of the will, as it's been alleged that he did, was absolutely disrespectful. And it was wrong for him to do. Now, I included this particular comment on YouTube so some people wouldn't think that I was just coming up with what I said about Gene Hackman out of thin air. And I quote, "I do think it's kind of messed up considering he admitted in multiple interviews that he was hardly ever around during their childhoods as he was off pursuing fame and money to support the family. Then he disinherits them and becomes a recluse. Seems so callous after all of that," end quote. And they put "to support the family" in quotations, which I agree with, because you can say, oh, well, this pursuit of fame and money, it was to help my family. But again, how much are you helping them if you're not actually there? Once again, they would have preferred his presence over any amount of money that his fame could have gotten him. Which is why I keep saying, since he was going to throw them on the back burner for the money anyways, he could have at least left them some of the money that he threw them on the back burner for, if that was what he was going to do. That was the least he could have did. Someone else commented, and I quote, "Especially after he married a woman their age and set up everything to be left to her." I mean, if anyone was wondering why it took so long for them to be found and why his kids weren't checking on him, I know I'd be pretty salty if my dad was never around my entire childhood, left my mom, married someone my age, and basically disowns me to leave all his money to his new wife. It is his money to do whatever he wants with, and he and his second wife clearly loved each other, but I feel bad for his kids, end quote. The way this particular person framed it is how I believe most people are looking at it, and I don't understand how anybody expects somebody to look at it any other kind of way. Like, whenever we do think about it, she was the same age as his children. His children are in their 60s. That woman was in her 60s. It really does look like the stereotypical case of the American rich man who left his family, and there are men who are not rich who do stuff like that, left his family for some younger woman the age of his children. People can set up and say, oh, well, she was 65. She was still young enough to be his child, whether people want to accept this or not. Got married to this woman, and then basically act like he didn't have a family anymore outside of that woman. As I've mentioned before, there are people who have gone through this, experienced this in real life, which is why they can see it for what it is. A lot of children who are the products of these kinds of relationships, situations, if you will, who have experienced this, who have been traumatized by it. Like I said, we don't know everything. We don't know all the details. This is just what we're assuming based off of what we're seeing and off of what came out of his mouth. Because like I said before, people will say, oh, that's not true. You don't know that. But if the man admitted he wasn't there as a father, what else do you expect people to think? Another person said, and I quote, "Whenever I hear of cases like this one or similar, I'm so grateful my parents married and stayed together. No illegitimate children, no scandals or strife, and nobody took advantage of them to influence distribution of their modest assets. My sibling and I split everything per the will. Blended families are complex, and more so when a new wife is much younger. Any guy hoping to be taken care of in his old age needs to know things can go sideways rather unexpectedly. My former boss's father lived to 90 and was widowed twice. Neither spouse living past 73, end quote. This is very, very true. I don't think people really understand how you can really be making plans for the future and then life will cancel your plans. Things will happen. Things happen all the time, quite frankly. You thinking, oh, this person's going to live longer, and then they end up not living longer. Part of me believes, honestly, like I said, this is my speculation. I'll say allegedly, this is just my personal opinion, that he married her being 30 years younger than him on purpose because he wanted somebody essentially to replace his children where his will and his assets was concerned. Once again, not considering that he might actually outlive her. Another person said, and I quote, I can definitely say in my state that if the beneficiary passes away first, they are no longer beneficiary. If no others were named, then the estate is distributed as if there was no will, end quote. Another person said, and I quote, they don't have to contest his will. His wife predeceased him, which means her estate went to him because he no longer has a beneficiary listed in his will for his assets to go to. They will be distributed to his closest living survivors. After probate and taxes get their share, the kids will get what's left because he didn't make provisions for them. It will most likely be distributed evenly. Unless they want to fight amongst themselves, if Betsy left everything to Gene in a will, his children will also get these assets because she predeceased him. Considering she was much younger, she may have left her estate to other beneficiaries. If she left no will, this is another circumstance where 100% would go to Gene's kids. It would be mighty crazy, once again, uncannily a coincidence for him to have done all of this to keep them from getting that money, only for them to end up getting it anyways because of this uncanny circumstance. Like I said before, y'all know I don't believe in circumstances, though. Another person said, and I quote, if they aren't mentioned in the will as being disinherited specifically, then they aren't disinherited. And if she passed away first and he didn't name a second inheritee, then the money will flow to them, end quote. Once again, I'm going to keep stating this because somebody's going to have the audacity to make it seem like everybody's just siding with some evil children trying to steal their father's money in a convenient situation of his demise. Once again, he said out of his own mouth, he did not create a good situation with him and his kids. That could have led to a strained relationship. They could have fell out for all we know. Maybe that was why he cut them out of the will. Maybe Leslie Ann wasn't exactly telling the truth whenever she said that they had a good relationship with Betsy. I said maybe. Speculation, my opinion. But she just said that because that was saving face, so to speak. Maybe they didn't have a good relationship. Like I said before, if it's true, he was not a good father to them, and then he further slapped them in the face by cutting them out of his will to keep them from getting the money once again that he put them on the back burner for. I can't say I feel bad for the money going to them anyways. But you've got people out here who are just desperate for those people to be disinherited from their parents' money, from their father's money. They want them people to be unnamed in that will so badly, or to be named specifically to not get the money. It's ridiculous. It's giving y'all a bunch of malicious, evil parents. And y'all want the same thing to happen to these people that y'all done probably did to y'all's own kids. And it's disgusting. This one particular person on YouTube basically explained how, once again, we don't know all the details. We do know the optics. Once again, what he said, that he admitted that he added to this strained relationship by not being a very present father. And then on top of that, once again, doing this with the will. And on top of all of that, Betsy being in the middle of it complicated it all even more. And that nobody believes that he was tricked into doing this by Betsy because they both allegedly wrote their wills with this involved while he was still in his right mind years ago, years before all of this happened. Which is why, once again, people feel like it was Gene who was at the center of all of this mess, how all this got started, how it all got to this point to begin with, what he did, his lack of involvement, his decisions. Now, once again, there are multiple people saying that they've been through this situation with their parents, that it was a very stereotypical situation to see somebody put their family through. They've seen it happen before themselves. They were the child of this kind of situation. They have family members who went through this, friends possibly, but that they had specific, like I said, experience with this. So they know how to see it for what it is, or for what we think it is, once again, based off the optics and based off of what Gene Hackman himself said. Now, the person before this commenter insinuated that it might have been a lot of Betsy, who was, like I said, dictating what he should do concerning his own children. At the same time, a lot of people said that they didn't believe that, considering the fact that, once again, he was in his right mind when he wrote up that will. He was a lot younger. This was years before this happened. But again, people kind of contested that, saying, well, she was very known for being very possessive and very protective, maybe even overly so over him, so to speak, and not in a, oh, this is my husband, I'm going to look out for him, he's in his old age, I'm going to look out for him the way I believe a wife should, but more of like a, I'm going to make sure he's around me and only me, I'm going to keep everything for myself, I'm going to make it look like I'm the only worthy beneficiary, and I'm going to make sure he puts everything in my name, so to speak. Now, there was somebody saying in New Mexico, apparently, which is where all this took place, there are some laws that really, go into detail about that. Or when was the time span of whenever they both passed away? Was it a certain amount of days? If it was a certain amount of days, then this can happen versus that can happen. There are certain laws put in place to regulate this kind of stuff, and whether or not his children will be able to contest a will due to the circumstances. Most people that I've come across feel like they should receive something considering everything, and because they are his children, although the law is the law, and like I said before, different states, different laws concerning those things, different details, etc. We'll just have to wait for more details and see what goes on. I may make another podcast about this situation because, like I said, this was very uncanny. I'm just being real honest with y'all. If you're interested in the podcast, it's just $1 a month on Patreon. There is a link where it says more about this channel. Anyways, y'all let me know what y'all think about all of this down in the comments below respectfully. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Y'all all have a very blessed, beautiful, and safe day.